Hi everyone. This is August 22nd, 2024, and this video was part of my video journal to try and recover from the trauma of watching my government, the BC New Democratic Party, with the acting premier of David Eby, confine, incarcerate, lock up my little brother, Paul Kierans, who had Down syndrome, for 588 days. He was my last surviving relative from a big family here in Greater Vancouver. They locked him up and then killed him at Burnaby Hospital. They locked him up when I objected to a fraudulent and forged power of attorney created by his group home administrators, L'Arche, that's L'Arche. I discovered in January of 2022 that a year earlier, on February 1st of 2021, the director of L'Arche invited my then 80-year-old nun sister, 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario, who lives in a convent and who's never lived with Paul, who does not understand his speech, has never spent a minute alone with him, contributed 1 minute to his care or 1 dime to his care. But L'Arche wanted to avoid the opinion. I have a sister who lives on Vancouver Island who is a COVID-19 skeptic. And so L'Arche secretly by email invited the nun. This is what I discovered through court disclosure. So L'Arche secretly invited the nun to become my brother's guardian for every possible decision that a person can have, who he would associate with, what his medical care would be, where his money would go. And they wanted to have the elderly nun as guardian because she didn't understand Paul's speech and she couldn't see what they were doing to him. So I didn't discover this until January of 2022. And when I objected to it, they immediately terminated our agreement that I could visit him twice a week, once at the group home and once at my home. And they reinstated the visits for 6 months. And then when I complained to the police about the fraudulent and forged representation agreement, and they discovered that I had complained to the police, they terminated permanently L'Arche terminated permanently my visits with Paul and his visits with me, and locked him away to a room in Burnaby. I was allowed a 10-minute telephone call with him once a week, and he begged for me to visit with him. He told me that he missed me over and over again. He told me that he loved me. I'm one of the few people in the world that understand his speech. I've never seen the same group of people working at this L'Arche group home two visits in a row. What their business model is to bring in young women from around the world, pay them. They're not unionized at all, and they just move through there. And what we now know is that L'Arche was created as an sex cult. I'm not kidding about this. This came out after the founder, Jean Vanier, died in 2019. It was discovered that he had preyed on at least 28 workers at L'Arche. And L'Arche was allowed to investigate itself. There was no police investigation of the sex assaults and predation on these workers. L'Arche said that the residents, the incapable adults that they had in their care, were not affected by this SEX cult. But there's no way of knowing that. And now I believe that that did happen. But anyways, so when Lars discovered in September of 2022 that I had reported the fraudulent and forged representation agreement to the police, they terminated my visits. So this was so that I couldn't get a sample of Paul's signature, and so that I couldn't interview him, or the police couldn't interview him. And they didn't. And I fought tooth and nail through the legal system trying to reinstate his visits. One of the first judges that we appeared before said that I relied on some kind of right for us to associate with each other. She said, Ms. Walker relies on some kind of right for her to associate with her brother. I went to the Supreme Court of Canada twice, but David Eby was allowed to lock up my brother. I went to the BC government office every single day that my brother was locked up and dropped off a letter just asking for a meeting with their staff to explain my side of the story and to ask for an investigation. And they never met with me once. They were proud of that. They didn't want to know. They didn't want to know. So on April 12th of 2024, I had my last telephone call with Paul, and he said to me, Kathleen, take me to a movie. And apparently the next day he had a stroke. But I wasn't informed until my nun sister could fly in from Ontario. She never tried to move him to Ontario, where he could have an in-person visit with a family member. Just a truly evil person. A combination of a perfect storm of evil government workers, government, and my sister and her community, the Sisters of St. Joseph of Sault Ste. Marie, that aren't in Sault Ste. Marie, they're in North Bay, Ontario. But they can write off all their legal expenses, and I estimate they wrote off about $350,000. They had 2 different law firms, one in Ottawa and one in Vancouver, working to keep my brother locked up. And they could write it all off. You, the taxpayer, are paying for their legal expenses, their fancy Ottawa and Vancouver lawyers. So my sister took her 2 days to fly in when they could see that he wasn't going to die right away. She bothered to fly in from North Bay, Ontario. But as soon as I found out, I got an email about 8:30 on April 15th, 8:30 p.m., and I was at the hospital within 30 minutes. I was allowed 1 10-minute visit with my brother a day, although I stayed outside in the lobby of the hospital 10 to 12 hours a day, every day that he was at Burnaby Hospital. But 10 minutes a day was enough for me to see that Paul was recovering. The second visit that I was there, the first visit that I was there, I said, Paul, it's Kathleen. And he grabbed my hand and he squeezed it like a steel vise and wouldn't let go until I had to leave. And then the next visit, I brought a book, a great big coffee table book of movie stars for him to read. And he sat up and he grabbed the book out of my hand and he started turning the pages perfectly. He was so happy to see me, and I was so happy to see him. So I could see that he was recovering, as the vast majority of people with strokes do. But then on April 21st, I got a call from the police saying that they were they had been directed by Ottawa to investigate the fraudulent and forged representation agreement, the guardianship agreement. And I went to court the next morning and told the judge that I had received information from the government that might change their position about enforcing or allowing me to visit my brother. I had borrowed $12,500 and got 2 expert reports that I was a suitable visitor for my brother and that we would both benefit from my visiting him. So my sister knew on the April 22nd that the police had reopened the investigation into the fraudulent and forged representation agreement. And when I got back to my brother's room from court, he had been killed. I could see that he was dead. He was not completely non-responsive. They had removed his ventilator, they had removed his catheter, and he had been sedated to death. And I felt so helpless. I felt so helpless. The main point of doing these videos is trying to convey the helplessness that I felt. Here I was trained as a psychologist. I worked with profoundly incapable adults for the BC government. I worked as a federal prosecutor. I was trained as a lawyer, practiced law, and I helped so many people over the course of my career as a lawyer. And yet I couldn't help the person that I felt closest to and that I most loved in the world, and that was my little brother. I'd been protecting him from predators, from cruel people, because of his Down syndrome from my earliest memory. And in the end, I couldn't protect him from my evil sister, my evil nun sister, and Larsh and David Eby. I could tell by the government not meeting with me that they liked the fact that they could ignore my complaints about my brother. They liked the power. So one of the things I'm trying to get the law changed in Canada to reflect the law, Peter Falk's law in the United States, where guardians and conservators of incapable adults cannot confine and isolate their incapable adults from their other loved ones, which they often do as a means of retaliation to get even with or to settle scores. And that's exactly what my evil nun sister was doing. She isolated my little brother to settle some scores with me. In fact, that's what she said. That's what she told me. Anyways, I'm trying to get the law changed, but in the meantime, the evil and cruelty of this socialist, communistic, New Democratic Party, headed by David Eby, who's appointed himself the Premier of British Columbia, has been made clear to me. They're truly evil as any Stalinist regime or Mao's regime. It's the government. That's the whole point. They wanted to show me the government was the boss and I was nothing. And my affinity for my little brother and his affinity for me meant nothing. So throw these assholes out on their ass on October 19th. Vote for the BC Conservative Party. They're best situated to overthrow the BC New Democratic Party. Get out there, vote, bring 10 friends, apply to be a scrutineer, because they'll steal this election if they can. They will hang on to power by any means necessary. But the main point that I'm trying to convey, and I don't think I'm doing a very good job, is the total helplessness that I felt as I was watching my little brother be murdered before my very eyes. I know once my sister found out that that the police were going to investigate the fraudulent and forged representation agreement, he had to die. And he was dead within 24 hours. Anyways, Paul, I miss you so much. I just haven't got the heart to give away your puzzles and games and artwork and clothes. I just don't have the heart to do it. I hope you're having fun in heaven with Mom and Dad and Murray and Teresa and Harry.